Great.
Thank
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is an exciting time. We finally gotten our annual report out the door, and I'm excited to present it to you. So thank you to Fernando and to Dave and to the rest of the STWG team for inviting me. Well, congratulations to all of you on your final meeting of the year and also on the final working group meeting of the Maryland Commission on Climate Change for the whole year. We have many, many, many meetings throughout the year. So this is really great that we've made it through 2024 and have put ourselves in a great position to move on to next year. So the annual report. We held our final meeting of the year on December 12th for the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, where we finished deliberation on recommendations. And this report is due to the General Assembly and the governor through statute on December 15th. And that was a Sunday, which meant that we had to get it out on Friday, December 13th. So we had about 24 hours between the finalization of the recommendations in the commission to actually getting the report submitted to our statutory destinations. So a huge shout out to ECO, Amy Lambert in particular. She did a fantastic job finalizing a report and also making it fully accessible. So if anybody has any sort of vision impairment or other limitations, they can still read our report and get that excellent information that we put out there. So that's really exciting. It's a beautiful report as well. We'll scroll through it in a moment. So with double the number of recommendations, double the number of working groups this year compared to previous years. We had 4, now we have 8. It was a lengthy process, and I think Dave put it nicely that there was certainly a lot of conversation, and all of these were certainly well reviewed. Thank you to the STWG for your contributions to that, and also for the update on the science that you contributed to this annual report. That's a really important component of this, and we really appreciate your work there. So now we can start going through the report itself. What I'll do here is I'll go through this very briefly, and then we can take some time to discuss it in more depth. There are 27 recommendations in here, so I don't think that it's necessarily fruitful for me to go through each of these one by one. We can talk about these if people have questions, and I can direct you to where to find it so that when you have more time, you can sit down and go through these and give them the attention that they deserve. So what is actually in this annual report? So we have a letter that is from Secretary McElwain, who was the chair of the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, and also from Kim Coble, who was a co-chair on the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, and they give a nice forward to the annual report. Then we have a short introduction where we talk about what the commission is and going over our membership and the changes to membership over the past year. Followed by some background on the statutory basis for this commission and our requirements within it, and also some of the policy actions that have been happening this year around that, such as the executive order from the governor, which was a really exciting piece of legislation to come out, or an announcement that came out. And then finally, we get to the meat and potatoes of this annual report, which is our recommendations. So again, we had 27 recommendations total. 7 out of the 8 working groups under the commission submitted recommendations. The PVWG, which is our solar photovoltaic group, did not provide recommendations this year. However, they did provide some form of recommendations in their study, which is going to be published any day now. It might even be today that goes out. So you can look for those in their report, but they didn't actually submit in this report here. And then finally, we have our update on the science, which again, thank you to the STWG for your contributions there. So here are our full list of recommendations here. Again, I don't think that—
Stop sharing, Jared. It's
did it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It still says that I am. Interesting. Well, then I can.
Maybe it's just me. Maybe I did something.
Are other people seeing my screen?
Nope. I got it. I clicked.
Okay.
Yeah. We
Great,
see it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Looks good to me.
I think that's a pretty brief overview that tells you what's going on with this report. Now I can tell you where to find it. So I'll stop sharing my screen and then reshare so that I can show you where you can find this report. Just give me one brief moment. Just bear with me for a second here. I've got a lot of tabs open.
Has the report changed from the version on the 12th of December?
So the version that you saw that was distributed to the commission is definitely very different. So what you saw was a pretty bare bones version. Now the contents of that is pretty much the same. There isn't a significant difference in what's been written in there, other than the inclusion of the final recommendations that hadn't been approved at that point. But the report looks very, very different. Amy and Eco did a fabulous job finalizing the report, and it's very pretty now. But there's no substantive differences in the language there.
Okay, kill the old one.
Yes, kill the old one. So if you're looking for this report and you want to find it on your own, you can go to the Maryland Commission on Climate Change website, and we have this little section here on the right, reports. You just click this link, and that'll take you where you need to go. And accompanying that is also our GHG spending report, which you can also look at, which accompanies the annual report as well. So I'll stop there. And then if people have questions or would like to take a closer look at specific recommendations, I'd be happy to answer whatever I can or connect you with somebody who might be better positioned to answer that question.
Thank you, Jared. Any questions about the report itself? Maybe
Jared,
we
I haven't waded through it yet, but are there any recommendations that are for near-term action, like with the General Assembly session coming up or something of that sort? That
Yeah,
take
yeah,
time
absolutely.
necessary?
And I won't give you an exhaustive list. There are a number within there. One that comes to mind is that we're hoping with the ECO group, the Education, Communication, Outreach group, that they can finally get their Climate Education Week proposal passed through legislation this year that almost passed last year to make official a Climate Education Week in April in Maryland, and hopefully now we can get that passed this year. There was some other legislation that we were expecting to go through that didn't actually make it all the way through the recommendation process. I think that the fossil fuel transport P is one that comes to mind. I believe that Dana Stein is still advancing something, but we did withdraw the recommendation from the annual report itself. So I encourage you to go through there and take a closer look, but the answer is yes, there are some that are for the coming legislative session.
The Renew Act had a last minute change of verbiage that the day of, like when the person presented it. So it's not exactly what was in the lead up to the comments. So I don't know, but it's in there.
Yes. So Jamie DeMarco was the proxy for Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi, who could not make that meeting. And Jamie presented that recommendation and his amendments to that on her behalf. I don't believe that those were shared with the commission ahead of time, but those were brought the day of.
Sort of like what's going on in Washington today, right? The other thing, and this is, don't have to answer the question, but maybe Fernando or Russ or Robin, who are members of the commission, are there recommendations beyond those that are associated with the scientific and technical working group that have significant scientific or engineering content or issues or questions that we need to pay attention to?
Yes.
There were,
please.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
No, Russell, you're better suited to answer this question.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll take turns, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm not prepared to answer the question, but there were, yeah, some of the other working groups had issues that had technical aspects, and I think we weighed in on them. It's probably worth going through it again. It's too late to change anything.
Yeah, no.
So,
I'm asking the question with respect to our subsequent discussion about what do we do next year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and so let me add to that, because it's so this was part of the discussion. It was fairly obvious now, particularly now that the groups have been expanded from 4 to 8, that there needs to be some cross-pollination between the groups, and so part of the work in 2025, perhaps for us, is to find out those points of connections with other groups where we can contribute, and maybe a good starting point for that are the 2024 recommendations that we can go through. So we were encouraged, all the groups were encouraged to interact with each other. Of course, how we do that, because every group has a different schedule and different composition, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but it is something that it's something on our to-do list for 2025. In addition to that, I should say that also the original the recommendations that were or at least the initial list, the recommendations that we started discussing was very varied. For example, our recommendations was a good example. You know, were 4 sentences that fit in half a page, right? In and out. We had groups where a single recommendation was more than a page, and they had 3 or 4 of those. So the commission is starting, we're starting to develop a template that will have a, like a brief statement of recommendation, a couple of sentences, and then it will allow to add context material as a side note, but not as the main body. This will also help accelerate and expedite the discussion of recommendations. So that template is being developed. We literally just got a first draft of that yesterday, and we'll be sharing that and polishing it up. But going back to your question, Don, yes, I think we will find part of the discussion of 2025 is connecting other groups. Maybe we can have guest speakers from other groups come to us, and we can participate as guests in other discussions, something like that.
Well, I don't want to be the Grinch that stole Christmas, but maybe a homework assignment for this committee is to, between now and the next meeting, each of us read the report and flag those things that we think are relevant to S&T.
Yes.
Is the 2024 available on the MDE webpage? All I see is 23.
It should be, yes. So if you go to the Maryland Commission on Climate Change webpage, it should be on the right-hand side under reports. I'll throw a link in the chat just to make it easier for everyone.
It's also linked in Fernando's message to us, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, but I don't know. I went straight there. All right, I'll find it or put it in the chat. That's good.
I think one of the things Fernando touched on that is a process, for all the groups to be very clear in what their recommendations are, be very short in those recommendations, and provide more context to the commission and less recommendations, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And that way commission members, and this came up at what's called a steering committee meeting of the commission, which are the chairs of the groups, of the different work groups, meet with the leadership of the commission itself. This kind of came up recognizing that the process this past year was cumbersome, and they wanted to streamline it so all the commissioners had better, easier information to work off of in determining recommendations. And hopefully they'll see it'll be easier to see where there's cross-pollination.
Okay.
So I think they're also going to restrict. I saw it today. I think they're planning to potentially restrict each work group, because there are 8 work groups, to no more than 4 recommendations. Which isn't a problem for STWG, but I know some of the other working groups have had 20+ recommendations in some years from one working group, which makes it challenging.
Right.
And then finally, if the process was streamlined, we should be, maybe each of the work groups will be able to see the other kind of proposed recommendations and have input. I think that's ideal. Whether the schedule will allow for that or not is unclear, but I think that's the goal. And whether it's achieved in 25 or a later year. I think that's ultimately the goal, that there's time for the work groups as well as the commission members to really be able to see the different recommendations and either kind of join in or work together on them or give significant input to them, especially if they're concerning.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would say the real issue, of course, was what are we going to do about funding in a difficult era, both in the state and nationally. I've been been staying up late at night getting some proposals submitted before the money dries up altogether. The other substantive change, a little more focused on this working group, is we made some recommendations about digesters for dairy manure that the Maryland Ag representative didn't like. And so we need to re-examine that. That's on our work list too.
Right.
Maybe Eric can be helpful.
And the other comment we also received was that we don't really have any community input, which I totally agree with. And so next year, we probably need to either have somebody actually on the work group that has a community perspective or invite people to be a part of the conversation.
Right. So, yeah. Yeah. So the key feedback that came just strictly out of our recommendations is to get input from the community. So I think as part of our work plan for 2025, there needs to be some sort of outreach, or even either we go out or we bring community people in, or or some version that will allow us to capture that input.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a little tricky. In one sense, our job is to provide scientific and technical guidance to the larger commission and to the legislation. On the other hand, I agree that we should, set up that guidance and then ask the people who are most affected by climate change.
Correct.
What are we missing? Does this address your needs? And Robin and I have some connection to some of the groups in Baltimore and some of the other more disadvantaged parts of Maryland where the community members are quite vocal about what they're concerned about.
Right.
And they of course don't have technical background for the most part, but they know they don't like the urban heat island effect. They know they don't like frequent flooding. They don't like having black carbon, which is a greenhouse forcing substance. They don't like emissions from landfills or wastewater treatment plants blowing into their neighborhood. So we should be aware of their concerns. And yeah, maybe we need to see if any of them are willing to voice concerns to this working group.
Fernando may not know this. So sorry if I'm springing this on you, Fernando. I did hear from someone from the woody biomass industry, and they weren't particularly pleased. Although, frankly, they offered changes to our recommendations, which were already passed, and communicated with them that it was already agreed to by the MCCC, and was moving forward. And their changes were actually just very, very modest. I think their biggest concern ultimately was the tier 1 designation of not allowing it to be a tier 1 designation. But this was someone who was representing very small wood biomass to energy programs, and I was asked to spend an hour with him on the phone, which I did, to hear his concerns, and he was very, very nice gentleman. I look forward to working with him or meeting with him at another time. He was recommending that we try to do a visit to a woody biomass to energy plant. Frankly, we tried to do that in 2024 and it just didn't work out schedule wise. And And, you know, he's offered for us to do it in this coming year. I told him I would go first. There's one actually about 3 miles from my home or 5 miles from my home that he could take me to. So so we agreed that I'll go first and we'll see what's there and whether it's worth a visit for the whole group.
We put a lot of energy into that one. Went out to Frostburg, a whole
Right,
of meetings, several people.
right.
And to be fair, the other side got a little bit grumpy as well, saying you're not lambasting emissions from burning wood enough. So if
Yeah.
we've got both sides of the issue dissatisfied, then it means we've done our job.
Probably so. And I would say, you know, it was clear, he made it clear to me that the large plant in Western Maryland was withdrawn and is no longer under consideration by the state. And I think that was some of the concerns in previous years that we've had with woody biomass. But anyway, I just put that out there as, you know, having some communications with the community as we move forward with our recommendations is not a bad thing. Whether we change them or not, you know, is a different matter. But hearing them out is probably a good thing overall for the process.
Comment. So I serve on the Maryland Clean Energy Center Board of Directors with Paul Pinsky, Director of MEA. And we discussed woody biomass, and he's very much against it. He doesn't want to see the funding that came out of the Climate Solutions Now Act diverted to woody biomass. He feels the only way we're going to meet our climate goals is going to things that are actually carbon free, and that is not. So just FYI.
Yep.
Just watch your own biomass, Dave.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, Eric and I put a fair amount of effort into this. So did some other people.
Sure.
And I'm pretty comfortable with our recommendations.
I think we hit it right, frankly. You know, we did consider these areas.
Yeah.
Again, his offered changes were negligible, I thought. After we had talked.
Yeah. And I think the recommendation itself was well received with a little bit of noise on either side, but probably this is a good example of, yes, we did outreach to the community, yes, we listened, yes, we visited, and this is our recommendation based on that, right? So I think probably the added context would help make that recommendation stronger. I mean, just in retrospect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a
Yeah,
I-
I mean,
I have
Robin
a
is
proposal
the expert, but let's face it, wood smoke is a health hazard.
Yeah.
I like the way it smells too, you know. I like a fire in my fireplace, but I don't want to breathe it every day.
I have a proposal pending with Hughes Foundation to do an analysis of secondary forest regrowth rates and that trade-off between the initial pulse of CO2 with harvesting and CO2 emissions with regrowth of the forest, to try to put a little more rigor to that analysis. And we'll see if it gets funded, but it was kind of a coincidence that we were working on this and Hughes came up with an RFP that included this as a possible scope that could be included. So we'll see what happens. Eric, could you explain it? Could you mention one more time who it was you were referring to?
Paul Pinsky.
Pardon me?
Paul Pinsky, the delegate who led author on the Climate Solutions Now Act, is now director of MEA.
Yeah, he used to
right.
be a senator. He's the one who wrote the difficult legislation. Our goals that are hard to meet.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, so we'll so basically that was a little bit of a synthesis of the 2024 report and a little bit of the process moving forward, as a little bit more engagement with the community, even though it appears that we have done some, and putting more of that community context in the science recommendations. So it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a heavier lift, but not undoable. So ready to talk about 2025? Yes? All right, awesome. I've been giving some thought as to, what we do as a group in 2025, and we have our mandate to produce the science update section to the report. We have a mandate to produce some science and technology-based recommendations, absolutely, right? But thinking about maybe a more ambitious contribution, and maybe we decide, nope, this is too much to do, etc. But this was motivated by Dawn sent me a report that was done in 2008 by the then, was it called SCWG at the time? I don't know, Dawn. You're
Was,
here.
yeah, it was.
Good. So
Right when the commission was first formed,
right.
and that was a specific task that
Right.
was given to us in the executive order.
Yeah, and I circulated the report over email. I'll just share my screen and just so we have it in front of us. Let's see. Let me see if this works. Share. So you should be seeing. Are you seeing this or no? Did I share the wrong screen?
We see it.
Okay, good. So it's actually, it's a very nice report to read, and it's fairly ambitious, and I don't know at the time, and it's good that Dawn's here to provide some context. I don't know if this required some funding or what. How was this actually done? Was this? But this is a little bit of a heftier, more solid contribution that's probably worth taking a look at, given that this was done in 16 something years ago. So that's an example, just for inspiration purposes, of things that we could attempt to accomplish. I had another example, so I'll take this off this. Well, actually, let me share another piece of my screen. Then I came across, and I remember when I was originally appointed to the STWG when I was at Maryland, the Joint Global Change Research Institute. So Ghassem Asrar was part of the group, right? And I know that they're no longer represented, but that same group, that same lab, which is part of the Maryland community, it's still very active in scenario planning and scenario development, right? This paper came out, I believe it was last year, and I also shared it, which is an analysis of a net zero scenario 2050 for the United States on a state-by-state basis. So Maryland is there, right? So I was thinking, it will be interesting, cool, whatever you want to call it, to as part of our work together, we could try to do like a scenario analysis for Maryland. What does the net zero analysis for Maryland look like, and how does that touch sectors, agriculture and energy and water and and sea level rise and all these things. For inspiration purposes only, but I thought we could have a nice brainstorming as to what do we do for 2025 to contribute to so that particularly that science update of the report looks a little bit heftier. That's a little bit of what I would like to do. So I'll shut up and we can brainstorm a little bit. And I see Russ smiling, so it's good. So that's a good sign, because I don't see you smiling this frequently, Russ.
I'm just remembering how Don got us to work our backsides off for money. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can give you some
Please.
background on that. This was, as I mentioned, in 2007, Governor O'Malley had an executive order that created the Maryland Climate Change Commissions well before it was put into statute. And it had in his charge, he had some specific goals. He had one. He said they wanted one report on greenhouse gas emissions, reducing emissions, another one on adaptation, another one on science and technology, on the assessing the impacts of climate change. So we did this because it was expressly stated in the first executive order. And as Russ pointed out, it was done, got no special funding. I think Dave, I can't remember where we got some money to actually prepare the report, printing it and so on. But
Yeah, I
but
think,
it got,
we got foundation support for it, Don, was my recollection.
yeah, but actually putting the report together, it was basically a lot of voluntary efforts by
Yeah,
people like
absolutely.
Russ and others who contributed to it. Some of those were members of STWG, but others were experts within the community we reached out to. And then just like that, just like the annual report of the greenhouse of the commission, you get apples and oranges and things of various lengths. And so what I did as editor is just kind of right-sized all of that and put it into a similar format. And then, we had that group to review it and produce. It was done in less than a year from the time we started. And the other thing was, since then, it was used as part of the rationale and justification for the first Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act. So this was, look, these are the potential impacts of Maryland. And so that was a critical component of that. And then it was used also as sort of the template, as a starting point for the adaptation and response working group about what do we need to adapt to. So there was a lot of interchange between when we were doing this to the adaptation and response working group, and they used this since then. Now, as you pointed out, Fernando, this is like next year will be 17 years. And I think I tried to get my copy here to see what IPCC assessment, I think we were using like assessment 3 or
Probably,
something like that.
probably 4.
4, yeah.
Yeah, could have been 4 because that went out in 2007. So
Yeah. So it was so the point is that it's pretty dated in some sense. And in broad strokes, it's probably still pretty relevant and accurate, but it is pretty dated. And so the question is that if we want to update an impacts assessment, and also since then, there's been a national assessment, the U.S. national assessment, which actually, believe it or not, took some of its approaches in the second national assessment from this report, with the graphics and the style of presentation. So what I think would need to be done is basically you draw from the recent AR6 and the last national assessment and kind of customize it with some additional information about ongoing research we have in Maryland, to Maryland. Now, it is not a small undertaking, and it's going to take a group of dedicated people to do it. Alternatively, you could look at it and say, we don't need to do the whole thing, but there are pieces of it. There's certain areas of impacts assessment we might need to do a more focused, deeper dive on. For example, we do already, under the rubric of the STWG, the every 5-year update of sea level rise projections. We already done those. We did those in 2023. So there's no reason to kind of redo that until we have to, in the next cycle. So one option is, and maybe in consultation with the adaptation and response working group, is to look at what areas of impacts of climate change that we think need to get a little bit more attention. Maybe there's newer information out from them and out available that merit an update, or you could do a comprehensive cover the waterfront as well. Again, it's not an easy task, but it can be done. I mean, it was done by volunteers. It wasn't, no one was paid to do it, the actual people who wrote it, but we did get some foundation support in actually producing it.
I think one of the topics had also been in the recommendations to redo the public health update, because that one had not been done since 2016, and that was with the Department of Health and the School of Public Health down at College Park. So that's the similar type thing that we could look at and combine.
Okay.
Yeah, that definitely needs some updating. I mean, you can't be experts as to everything.
I think that was something that Amir Sipkota and I had proposed and supported.
Yeah, we had a few people from Johns Hopkins, but it would be great, yeah, to bring in, I mean, in the intervening time, the School of Public Health here is much stronger.
Right.
And I don't think it hit all of the human health aspects.
Sorry, probably not. That's why we need you. Now, we did some things like, I mean, in terms of actual health impacts that due to climate change, the
Mhm.
exacerbation of urban air pollution, urban heat island effect, these are going to cause more morbidity and mortality than anything else.
Mhm.
So, but I am not a public health expert, so
Right.
this is
And how sea level rise would lead to vector-borne
Yeah.
illness, stuff like that.
yeah. Hmm.
Well, I mean, this takes us to the space of who who can be our guest speakers during 2025, and we started populating the calendar with all our meeting dates in 2025 and who we can invite, and we could use suggestions. I mean, we have a couple of people already lined up, Chesapeake Conservancy, from the Eco Group, we do have someone from Maryland's School of Public Health, Ariel Wharton. But yeah, so ideas as to who to bring in, right? And that includes people from other groups, like Eco and others. So that's something else, another ask for us to propose, to nominate individuals that we can contact and invite.
I think, Fernando, with respect to doing something on impacts, I would think, I don't know whether you have them come and present to us or you just consult with them in some other way. But it'd be really important to understand what the adaptation and response working group is doing and what their information needs may be.
Right.
Because it is, I mean, it is as you can read in the news, that things have changed. I mean, this issue of flooding, pluvial flooding, which was talked about then, but it's now become kind of a big global issue, and it happened faster and stronger than a lot of people thought. So that there are some things like that, I think, that require some fresh looks.
I can go a little bit in depth on the speakers that I lined up, just to see if that might spark any
Sure.
ideas, and then thoughts from everyone. So yeah, like Fernando mentioned, we have a speaker lined up. He is the CEO of the Chesapeake Conservancy, Mark Conway. And he is going to be going over, what the Chesapeake Conservancy has been doing in 2024, what their goals are in 2025, and then also the bill has been moved to the House to register the Chesapeake Bay as a national recreation area under the Department of Interior. So that would be part of the national parks system, and how that would change fisheries, climate resiliency, the economy, tourism, in the Chesapeake area. Yes, we then have a speaker. So then we have two speakers from Eco coming. And then in June, we have Ariel Wharton from University of Maryland School of Public Health. And she is going to be talking about more of social justice areas in Maryland, and how the STWG can work locally, reach out, and then different communities that are being hit by climate change, and how they're being hit by climate change. And she's going to be showing some data and then and solutions as well. And that is it so far. Yeah, I am working on getting a speaker for data center sustainability, but that has proven to be a very challenging task since data centers tend to be private companies and they don't want to talk about that stuff, especially since it's, their competitors too, and they don't want anything out. And I've really just gotten some messages from their media relations groups, and that's it. So if anyone has any thoughts on the data center, or if anyone knows anyone that would be able to speak, definitely let me know.
I think on the data center issue, that it's a tricky one to get significant information on. It might, and I don't quite know which agency would be the right agency, but I could reach out to MEA to determine if they have a sense of what's coming down the pike, or if not them, I'm not sure who. Planning is done on a county by county basis, so it gets a little tricky from a statewide perspective. The other issue that's come up, and frankly, it was kind of talked a bit about in the summer and early fall within the commission as an emerging issue, which was the small nuclear power plants. But I haven't heard that mentioned since. I think everyone then got focused on the annual report. But we might want to reach out to the mitigation working group and see if that's an issue that's of interest to them, and perhaps we could work jointly with them on that, and bring in some experts on the small nuclear power plants. That's kind of where I think, how to fill out some of that parts of that schedule may lie.
Yeah, that's a good
I think
idea. I
it's-
had
I
a
think-
very brief conversation with Steve Fetter about Maryland's nuclear future. And I don't know if you guys know who Steve Fetter is, but he, worked for Obama on their energy policy and other things. And he's not optimistic, but primarily because it just takes so long to get anything nuclear online. But he said he could give us some advice, but he's not all that focused on small nuclear facilities.
I think we need to kind of look at these options from the lens of what do we do about it. I mean, it has to have significant science advice content. I'm a little wary about getting proponents of various solutions just coming before us with sales pitches and that sort of thing.
Right.
So just like we've done in some recent ones where we kind of dive deep about what the science behind some of these issues. I think that's where the other thing, and Fernando, I mean, it's really your call, but I think we need to, for some of these meetings, if we're going to do serious work, I mean, beyond just listening to things, we need to preserve some of those meetings for those.
Yep. No, that's that needs to be factored into our agendas, and yes.
The other point, and I meant to mention it because you covered it, but your second idea about looking at the emissions reductions and what the challenges for Maryland, and so if I got it right, I think we really need to build on the work that that Nate Holtman's group, the Center for Global Sustainability, did, because they developed basically the reduction plan, the framework for it that served as the basis of the state plan. And so it would be, we don't need to redo that, but it is a broad, big conceptual plan, and there may be some elements in it that need further, deeper diving and further reflection.
Yeah. So Yeah, so that could be someone or a group to ask
Yeah.
to come and talk to us. Yes.
And there's someone, I forget who the woman's name is, but one of his researchers in that area has really led that effort.
Rena. Yeah.
Eric has his hand up.
Eric.
Yeah, just one area that I think we could look into that could lead to some recommendations and some policy in the short term is in the last year, this feed additive called Bovar has been approved by FDA that is supposed to reduce enteric methane emissions by 30%. And I know Maryland's dairy is not huge, but it's still big enough that we should pay attention to see what Maryland can do. There has been pushback on social media, especially in the UK, of groups saying worried that this is a toxic substance and it's going to harm the animals and harm people, but it has gone through FDA approval. And so this might be an appropriate thing for us to look at the science of it and make recommendations about whether it's something that the state government should promote. And there's possibilities of even thinking about what sort of incentives could be given to the dairy operations to want to do it. Because at this point, in theory, if you produce less methane, there's more energy in the cow to produce more milk or more beef. But that hasn't really been proven yet. And so really farmers or the dairy operations, they would have to do this out of pay for it out of the goodness of their hearts if they aren't convinced that it's actually going to increase their productivity. But 30% reduction in enteric emissions is pretty significant. So that's a topic I think we could take on and maybe find somebody in the dairy industry that could talk to us about it.
Okay.
Yeah, Eric, this came up to us kind of through Delegate Dana Stein a couple years ago, to Peter and I, and we started working with the Chesapeake Bay Commission in trying to identify some experts that could help us understand this, that were regional. Because the commission also had an interest in it, and frankly, we struck out. There were people who knew about it and who read the papers about it, but no one who felt that they were an expert in it from the region. Now, we don't have to go to a regional expert
We can try.
for this group.
Bring someone from Reno. Yeah.
It was pointed out that Maryland's dairy is not only small but also significantly decreasing. So versus the watershed, which is a different issue. But Maryland itself is on the kind of lower end of the dairy business currently. But
there are people at Penn State who have expertise in this, and
yeah,
I could help us find some.
Yeah, no,
if there's agreement that that's worth spending some time on, I can help find some.
Yeah, who are the big cattle state producers? Texas?
Yeah, Pennsylvania, more so than Maryland.
Well, the reason we're looking first at dairy is that this is a feed additive, so you have to have daily touch points with your animals, whereas much of the beef operation that's pasture cow-calf operations that involve pasturing for a long time and then only finishing at the feedlot. So there's not as much opportunity yet to have a product that's available for beef cattle, but for dairy operations, it certainly is. And, even though Maryland is small, maybe it can serve as an example of what can be done to encourage its dairy industry to take up this opportunity to reduce methane emissions.
Yeah. And this would be one, that would be good, definitely good to get community input as we're working through that. So they'd be kind of learning and helping us through, or at least hearing from them what their either concerns about it or interests are.
Right.
Okay, we got Kim, and then I know Russ put a couple of things on the chat that I want to come back to.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. Since we're just throwing around ideas, if you don't mind, I'll throw a couple in. So data centers are definitely something I know the comptroller is trying to keep an eye on and pay attention to, as well as grid resilience and grid expansion, like the Piedmont project, for instance. So that's something that will be great to look at. Also, she's very concerned about insurance for Maryland residents, as these risky areas, insurance companies tend to want to pull out or increase prices. I'm not sure of the science component. I'm just throwing out like topics.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see. I also part of what the commission approved was potentially a study on the cost of climate change. And that would be something I hope to be a part of. That's going to be, again, that's more financial, budgets, economy, that kind of thing. But I think, there's a science component to help us identify what items are costing us money. So, sea level rise is contributing to salinization of farmland. So that's costing us money in loss of agriculture and so forth. So there could be a scientific component to that. And then I just had a conversation with the University of Maryland's Earth Systems Science Interdisciplinary Center.
Yeah, we know that well.
I figured you would. I'm a TERP, but this didn't exist when I was there. They have this climate resilience network. It's part of like some big grand challenge grant. And they're doing amazing work. They're putting sensors out into the bay to help predict flooding and sea level rise. And they also have sensors for wind, which, as we know, wind is increasing as well. As far as someone to come talk to us all, or at least someone for you all to work with behind the scenes. I talked to Mike Maddox and Ralph Ferraro. So
Sure.
Okay, that's all from me.
Russ, is this Mesonet or is this different?
Yeah, that was the wind one.
Okay.
There's a micronet and a mesonet. There's the mesonet that you know about that Sumont's running, and Tim Canty, who is at East now, I guess.
Okay.
His sins has a sea level rise, and he'd be happy to chat with us.
Okay.
I'll speak for him.
Yeah, I was just going to mention him. And when I was talking to Tim Canty, he did mention an economist, an environmental economist, for the cost of climate change. And it also needs to take into consideration the cost avoidance of missed increased healthcare costs, which is very hard to quantify. But this gentleman, James Archsmith, evidently has a map that he can figure out how to economize the benefits of decreased hospital ER visits and missed days of school and work, return on investment type things. So,
Robin, I'm going to throw my email in the chat. If you could send me, that'd be great.
Yeah. So here's a question. Is there any? I mean, I don't know offhand. Is there any of the other groups working on economics, financial aspects of? Because technically, this is like social. It is a social science aspect. So we could claim it as the domain of this group by incorporating that expertise. But
there is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Acts, and then the Climate Solutions Now Act required some economic analyses that were done in conjunction with the planning. MDE should be well aware of those. They were done among there's a group at Towson who did some of that, but I think it was heavy on the costs and cost savings of energy transition, and didn't do a very deep dive in terms of the cost of impacts.
And the cost of resilience measures. Right.
Yeah.
And it was very heavy on the jobs, whether it was going to cost jobs or
Right.
increase jobs, and that's in the energy transition portion.
Where did Beck go? Is he still with us? Because he's done that
He's
stuff.
sick.
Did he bolt? Okay.
But Russ, you put a couple things in the chat, invite Rita Colwell, antibiotics. I don't know, can you expand a little bit on these?
Sorry, for vector-borne diseases, Rita Caldwell is a heavyweight. And I just a real quick question to Eric: are these supplements, are they antibiotics that change the anaerobic bugs in the cow's rumen? You're shaking your head. You don't know.
No,
Okay.
no,
They're
it's
not. Okay.
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
It's a feed additive. Um,
Okay, it's not an antibiotic. That's
no, it's not an antibiotic, but it inhibits it inhibits methanogenesis
More biochemical.
through a different, more biochemical.
Is it an
You know, there's
enzyme?
also a lot of experiments going on with using algae, and it's the same sort of thing. It has a bromide component to it. So, you know, at high concentrations, bromide can be toxic, but this has, you know, had to go under review from FDA, and it's been approved.
Right. The other quick comment, there's a new ESSEC director who actually is very involved in policy. And so we may wish to invite him.
Yeah,
let
great
him
idea.
on. Lars Peter, and it took me 5 minutes to figure out how to spell his last name because he's Danish.
Looks like an eye chart.
So not to open a can of worms, but it occurs to me that our scientific working group and technical working group has never been asked to weigh in on the science behind sort of the marine biological science around windmills and offshore wind farms. And as you know, just from reading the paper, there's a lot of non-science out there about the harms that these do. And I don't know if that's anything we would want to get involved in.
We do have a group within UMCES that's actually working on that very specific issue, offshore, the
Right.
ecological impacts on fish and mammals and birds and things of that sort.
So if called upon, we could comment on that with some knowledge.
If we bring in the stakeholders, we might be here all day on that. Just living on the lower shore. I know how hot of a topic that one is.
All right. Yeah, good discussion. I wrote down 10 things. 10 potential topics. I know we're not going to be able to do 10, right? But I do volunteer to kind of write them up and we can discuss, prioritize, you know, select and maybe with some feedback from the commission, right? You know, and some feedback from the community, kind of narrow down so that it's just, you know, it's justified. That's good stuff. They're all very exciting and interesting.
Fernando, would you be able to send me that list and I can put it in the notes for this meeting?
Yeah, I'll write it up. I got I need an excuse to get out of the house because my house is overpopulated with guests for the holidays. So I need to tell them that I have work to do. So this is gonna be my work to do and
A good plan.
it's a very good plan.
My dad and I, when my sister was a Girl Scout, my mom was a Girl Scout troop leader. And once every couple weeks, the whole troop would come over. My dad and I would retreat to Barnes and Noble. And we said that we're going to look for books and I'm going to study.
There you go.
And that Barnes and Noble is a good retreat. Good fort.
let's see what else. So let's try to map out 2025. So we're, you know, there'll be a subset of topics that we'll focus on for recommendations. It could be a combination of updating some of the findings in that 2008 report. It could be new stuff. You know, we'll have dialogues as to how to do that. That prioritization will result in us selecting speakers to come in and so we can interact with them, right? And I want to maintain a dialogue with the commission throughout the process so that we can get some feedback and guidance, right? So that when we show up with our recommendations, it's been well socialized. That's a little bit of the plan so far.
Yeah, and I think in some of these, at some point earlier in 2025, we would want to start developing concepts of a recommendation.
Yes.
So that they can be shared more broadly, more quickly, and get some input sooner.
Share with other groups, share with other
Yeah.
groups and get their inputs. Yeah, so get a
So-
loop of that going.
So the final process would hopefully, everyone would understand what and why a little bit earlier in the process.
Yeah, the challenge for us, I think, is that, when I look at the other groups, they're more thematically oriented, they're focused on mitigation or other, we're science, so in technology, so we're cut across. And so it's a little bit, so actually in a way it's more fun because we can almost like pick and choose what areas to focus on and provide the science.
Fernando, I've got a couple of other thoughts about this
Sure.
coming year.
Yeah.
And the things that make this coming year, 2025, special and maybe a little scary. One is that Russ kind of joked about it in gallows humor about he's writing this proposal to get the last bit of money. If indeed the new administration in Washington is successful in substantially cutting funding for federal agencies dealing with climate science, in particular climate research, I think this committee this working group can be useful to the state of keeping the eyes and ears open about what we're hearing, what the consequences may be, because it could affect not only the research we do in our universities and funding for it, but we have a huge federal presence, as you know, of scientists who work in federal agencies or for federal contractors with NASA, NOAA, other agencies, NIH, and so on, that are potentially vulnerable to this. And so bringing our eyes and ears and kind of funneling that through you to the leadership in the state, through the Climate Commission and other groups of interaction, I think it'd be very, very valuable function that we could provide over this coming year. So
Yeah.
That's one suggestion. The other thing that's going to happen in 2025 is that they're going to amend the Chesapeake Bay Agreement, watershed agreement, and they have to do that during the 2025 period. Governors just ordered it. And so we don't know yet the degree to which they will take climate issues more into concern, but it's possible. And some of us have advocated that it's really time to bring together both the climate issue and the Bay issue in a more holistic way.
Yep.
We're looking at things that we're doing with reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Can we do that also in a way that helps protect the environment, protect human health, all of those other things? So this year is going to be an important year for that input. And it's a job you have independent of this commission, but the commission, the working group can help you, I think, in thinking about those things and how it might input to this new agreement that's going to be developed this year.
That's a great point.
So there's
Yeah.
both a threat and an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. Also, it's a way to kind of bring all these things together, right? I think that the Bay is the Bay is a common ground for everybody to come together and converge.
And we have to solve both problems at the same time, so.
Yeah, yeah, lots of good stuff. My list is up to 13 now, so.
You can need to spend a couple of days away from the family.
There.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever briefed the Climate Change Commission as a whole on N2O. That's nitrous oxide is not currently part of our greenhouse gas inventory in Maryland, and maybe now is not the time to add more expense and complication, but they should at least be aware of it. And there's at least one of us is an expert on nitrous oxide.
Yeah.
I can handle its photolysis and chemistry, but the biology part, that's for somebody really smart.
Well, Eric just led the international assessment of N2O.
Is he?
N2O is having a little bit of a moment in that there's been a national assessment of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition of the United Nations Environment Program, and a lot of other interest from private philanthropies. And there might be some way of, in the new administration, talking about saving farmers money for using nitrogen more efficiently and take the focus away from a climate gas, but focus on saving money and making farming more efficient. So there's a possibility there. Of course, that's probably the same thing we have to think about for methane, reducing enteric methane. In theory, it ought to make dairy and meat production more efficient.
Yeah, landfill management
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I do note in my brief sit downs on all the commission discussions, said that there's definitely a thirst to look at these socioeconomic linkages of everything we do. So, if it's enteric methane, or if it's nitrous oxide, if it's the more and more we can frame the implications on socioeconomic implications of the science, the better they stick as recommendations. So it's also something to think about as we decide and as we focus on these things. All right. Anything else in terms of brainstorming?
Fernando, I think you just have to call for any public comment before the meeting ends.
Right. So why don't we do that? How do we do that? Do I just say I call for public comment, or?
Yeah, you just, does anyone have any public comments they'd make?
There we go. That's the question.
Yeah.
Right. Well, folks, listen, we gotta craft ourselves a super cool agenda for 2025. I don't have to tell you that we're not going to be able to do everything that we just talked about today, but we will find a way to focus on a few things that have better impact, more of a priority. We'll find a way to prioritize, and but looking forward to working with you, and have a great break. Have happy holidays. If you think of anything over the holidays that's interesting, feel free to throw in an email. We'll catch it, and I'll summarize. I'll do a brief summary write up, and I'll distribute it for comments and for further thought. All right.
Or if we find anything that needs to be followed up on in the actual MCCC report.
Yes, very good. Yes, and yes. So Dawn's assignment, and I'm going to attribute it to Dawn, still stands. All right, folks. Enjoy the break.
Have a good holiday.
Very much.
See you in the new year.
Aye.
No Grinches.